I'm a scientist.
Suffice it that the blood of 1,000 men and women was spilled within these walls. Limbs twisted and broken, eyes gouged from bloody sockets, flesh burned black.
Please. No way to death. In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes. What you have to realize is that we're all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail.
The number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
What's up, guys? This is Jay Scott.
This is Trent Lackey.
And Chuck, where you at?
Right here, man.
All right.
Crank that up.
Yeah, you're listening to World of the Unexplained. Tonight we have Michael Haupt, where he's going to be talking about World War III. And September 11th, he's going to be talking about some of the stuff behind that. He's going to be talking about some of the trends coming up. You can visit his site at 3worldwars.com. And you can also call in live here at 877-722-7382, or for those of you numerically impaired, that's 1-877-SCARE-YOU2.
We know there's a couple of you out there.
That's right, or locally 336-996-1596. Michael, basically, he's going to discuss the current situation in the world. We're going to talk about all that good stuff. He's got a BS in Management Information Systems. He graduated magna cum laude from Harrington University in London.
And born in Johannesburg, right?
I think that's correct. But he's very widely traveled, and his site's really good. We're going to bring him on right now.
All right.
Doing?
How you doing, Mike?
Yeah, very good. Good to talk to you.
Fantastic.
Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
No problem at all. Well, I thought if we jump straight into it, there are a few things I'd like to discuss tonight, starting off with a definition of accidental versus conspiratorial history. Then we'll talk about a chappie called Albert Pike, who was born a long, long time ago, and how he predicted 3 world wars. Then we might have a look at what people commonly believe are the causes for World War I and World War II, but then what I believe the real causes are. Then we'll talk about something called an occult signature, what that is and why use an occult signature. And then if things are really that bad, the way people are talking about in conspiracy circles these days, what can we do about it? How can we adapt our lifestyles and prepare for some of the things we see coming?
That's very important.
So those are the things I'd like to discuss. Is that okay with you?
That's great.
Let's do it.
Let me ask you a question real quick. The Pike person that you mentioned, was he a bishop?
Was he what?
Was he a bishop at one time?
No, he wasn't. He was a 33rd degree Freemason who is most famously known for writing a particular letter that predicted 3 world wars. But no,
Okay.
he wasn't.
Okay.
I was confusing him. I'm sorry, Mike. Go right ahead, though. Let's start out on this journey.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about conspiratorial history. There are really 2 fundamental ways of looking at history. The one that's most commonly accepted is the accidental view. What that means is that things just happen by mistake. So we talk about wars and revolutions. Whenever we're looking at any major world event that happened throughout history, it just happened by mistake. So wars start when one nation moves into the territory of another. Depressions occur when markets take unexpected downturns, or inflations occur when prices are driven up by shortages of particular products. Revolutions start when people always spontaneously rise up to overthrow the existing government. But there's another view of history which is called the conspiratorial view. And what that means is that events happen because of planned events prior to the event itself. So Franklin D. Roosevelt, who obviously saw many monumental events during his consecutive administrations, he was quoted as saying, "In politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, it was planned that way." Now, when we look at the way we're brought up, taken through schooling, all of the education, we never taught that things happen for specific reasons. It's always just an accidental thing. So the first time we come across this particular view of history, most people are pretty much against it. No way, how can anything be engineered? Things just happen. So that's just a brief introduction. I wanted to talk about the fact that there are two very different views of history.
Okay.
Does that make sense so far?
Oh, yeah, we're following.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Cool. All right, well, let's go straight into then Albert Pike and 3 World Wars. As I mentioned, he was born a long time ago, December 29th, 1809. He was said to be a Satanist, and apparently he indulged in the occult. He possessed a bracelet which he used to summon Lucifer, and he was apparently in frequent contact with Lucifer.
Not a good place to be. Not a good place to be.
He would have argued otherwise.
Oh, well. So what did old Lucifer tell him?
Yeah.
Well, he was, during many of these visions that he had, he described a letter. Now, this letter was apparently written on August 15th, 1871, and he outlined in some detail how 3 world wars were necessary to bring about the one world order. Now, the first thing, let me just say that this letter is subject of a fair amount of conspiracy itself. Many people claim that the letter exists. Some claim that it was at one stage housed in the British Museum in London. I've been there personally to speak to their chief, I forget his name, but the guy who handles all of their archiving, and he vehemently denied that the letter had ever been in that possession. He'd obviously been asked about it before. He knew what I was talking about, but stated in no uncertain terms that the letter has never existed. And yet the letter is quoted in many, many places, many different books all over the internet. So there's a fair amount of controversy about whether the letter existed or not. As far as I can ascertain, there is no conclusive proof of the existence of this letter. Take that as it may, but just to let you know that there is some controversy around the letter.
So who's quoted this, or what works have quoted this supposed fake letter?
The first particular person who quoted it was a guy called William Guy Carr, who wrote a book in 1929 called Satan, Prince of This World.
Oh.
Well.
Yeah, he apparently heard of it from a Spanish archbishop whose name slips my mind right now. But people in fairly well-known circles and fairly high up mentioned this letter without going to too much effort to try and prove conclusively that it was there. So it was almost as if in the early 1900s it was accepted that this letter was around. In my mind, it was then either suppressed or destroyed, or much the same as a book called The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. There's a huge amount of controversy around that book, whether it existed or not. So I think, the fact that there is so much information around this letter, in my mind, is an indication that it may well have existed at some stage. What we do know now is that there is no such copy available. I've spent a fair amount of time trying to track down this letter. It would be fantastic to see an actual copy of it, or see a scan of it or something, because then we'd know for sure that 3 world wars have definitely been planned. Now, there is no such thing. However, we can see the way events are turning out now in current history, as well as for World War I and World War II. The details explained in this letter are pretty specific and pretty accurate as far as history has turned out. So in my mind, it could well have been that whether Pike wrote this letter or whether somebody else wrote it, there certainly appears to have been a plan to engineer 3 world wars.
Okay.
Perhaps we can go into the detail of what he predicted for each world war, so we can get an idea of how accurate he was. Remember that the letter was written in 1871, so quite a while before World War I commenced.
Okay.
And pretty much what he was saying there is that the Tsars in Russia would make that country a fortress of atheistic communism. And what they really wanted to do was engage the British and Germanic empires, have the two of them fomenting this war. And at the end of the war, communism would be built up and used in order to destroy other governments and in order to weaken religions. So for those who are familiar with history, originally I wasn't that interested in history, so I didn't know all of this, but spending some time studying it, the political alliances of England on one side and Germany on the other forged between 1871 and 1898 by Otto von Bismarck and Albert Pike. Those countries were instrumental in bringing about First World War.
Okay.
So if we move along then to Second World War, what this letter said, and I'll read directly from the apparent letter, the Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. And this war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. And after the Second World War, communism was certainly made strong enough to begin taking over weaker governments. And in 1945, at the Potsdam Conference between Truman and Churchill and Stalin, a large portion of Europe was simply handed over to Russia.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And in the aftermath of the war with Japan, that helped to sweep the tide of communism into China. Now, astute readers will notice that the terms Nazism and Zionism were mentioned in this letter, supposedly written in 1871, but these terms, these movements, were not known at that stage. I think the important concept here is that the powers that be, some people refer to them as the Illuminati, the New World Order, whatever term you choose to use, pretty much coined this phrase, created the entire movements anyway. So for them to have used this wording is not that unheard of. The term, communism, as an ideology, originated in France during the Revolution. And this term was coined by a guy called Restif 4 years even before the revolution broke out. So it is fairly common to have words appearing long before they are widely accepted within mainstream. So I'm not too concerned that the terms Nazism and Zionism were not known generally in 1871 at the time that this letter was written.
So,
there's go ahead.
Okay, then what then attributes, for example, Marx and Engels are supposedly the founders of what we would know today as the communist political ideology, and Hitler obviously brought fascism into the limelight. And if these concepts were in existence somewhere before they came about, then why are they attributed to Hitler and Engels and Marx?
I believe it's a case of simply planning something long before it's brought into widespread use. When we consider that there are people behind the power, or rather people behind the persons currently in power. So, for example, use George Bush as an example. He's not the ultimate decision maker. There are people planning his policies long before they are interpreted, or rather implemented, and yet the implementation of those policies are attributed to Bush. Mm-hmm. So I'd imagine the same was true with Marxism and communism. They were planned and thought about and discussed many, many years before they were implemented by Engels and Marx. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so what I want to get to the crux of this. What does he say about what was his prediction about the Third World War?
The Third World War was very specifically just to arouse tension between Zionists and the Islamic world. So specifically what he said, they must take advantage of the differences between the political Zionists and leaders of the Islamic world. I'm reading directly from the letter now. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the modern Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, or the State of Israel, should mutually destroy each other. Now that to me is significant because right now we certainly do see tensions between Israel and the Middle East. And it's my contention that we will see more and more conflagrations happening within the Middle East, whether it's the U.S. invading or whether it's Israel itself invading her Islamic neighbors, Muslim neighbors. That is one element of what I believe to be the planned World War III that we will see escalating over the next few years.
Well, I think there's definitely, if there's going to be a nuclear weapon used anywhere in the world, it's going to be there first. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yes and no. I believe, remember that we're talking about a world war.
Yeah.
And the conflagrations that we're seeing happening in the Middle East right now certainly wouldn't constitute a world war because it's only within one continent. So I believe there are three key areas, either of which may trigger a nuclear explosion of some sort first. Now, the first would be the Middle East. The second would be China invading Taiwan, and the third would be North and South Korea. So either one
those
of those
North
three
Koreans.
hotbeds. Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
Right.
sorry.
You know, in recent news, we've seen plenty of talk of nuclear tests and so on with North and South Korea. So we're going to see more and more of those reports happening. And remember another thing, when all of these, if we accept the fact that there is such a thing as conspiratorial history, in other words, things are engineered, because we're talking about something on a global basis, it takes a fair number of years to have all of the pieces in place. And we may see some pieces ready earlier than others. So, for example, tensions between North and South Korea, that may be reaching fulfillment, but the Middle East isn't quite ready yet for everything to explode. So we've got to keep these things in mind, that there's constant juggling and engineering and making sure that all the pieces of the puzzle are in place first before a major world war can be triggered.
Now, what about
For me,
what about India and Pakistan? I mean, they're very, very close and have been for many years to be at odds with each other. And they both have nuclear weapons, and Pakistan is ostensibly our ally. And then you have the whole. I mean, what about that angle?
Well, I believe that you'd eventually see a joining of all of the Muslim nations against the tiny state of Israel. So how that might play out, I don't know the detail of all of that, but they will certainly form an alliance of some sorts, even though they've been at each other's throats for a while. The entire Muslim world will be so incited that they will forget political ideologies and differences they may have had in the past and join together as religion is going to play a very large part in uniting peoples of the world and bringing them together to fight towards a particular common goal. Religion is going to be used as a key instigator to bring people together.
Well, let us not forget, I guess, that India is the largest Muslim nation in the world. People forget that because
As far as population.
as far as population, not their leadership, of course. And of course,
correct.
the leader of Pakistan is a Hindu.
Imagine that.
Well, in the scenario I've heard is either way, if there's a nuclear detonation in Pakistan or in India, India's the one who loses out both ways because of the atmospheric current through there. I mean, if there's a detonation in Pakistan or in their own country, either
Then the
way, they
Muslims
get the brunt of the blowback.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, what do you think? Now I've heard something. Let me bring this up, Mike. I don't know how much of this. I can't remember. I can't remember the guy's name, and maybe since you follow this kind of thing a lot more than I do, maybe you'll know who I'm talking about. But I'd heard this guy doing a radio interview. I don't remember his name. He's an author of a book. And he had talked about basically that a lot of these Islamo-fascist, I use the term on this show because I can, but a lot of these Islamo-fascists that want to blow up America and destroy everything that we believe in here, they're bringing across that they have smuggled in these suitcase nukes across the Mexican border, and they're going to set these off, and they call it the American Hiroshima, basically. And as soon as the U.S. were to invade Iran, they were going to set these things off. One of the guys that wrote a book on one of the interviews I'd listened to, I don't know, about a month or so ago, I'd heard this theory. Have you ever heard of anything similar to that?
I've certainly heard the theory mentioned many, many times. I'm not familiar with an individual who's come up with this idea, but it's quoted in many different places over the internet. Now, for me, the first thing immediately there is, where is the evidence of these Muslim radicals who are bringing the suitcase bombs into the country? Remember that 9/11 was pinned on various Muslim activists.
Yes.
Different names that we can mention. And there's no evidence of that whatsoever. I believe that what's his name has been sentenced to death by hanging recently. No, that to me is absolute nonsense. There's evidence that he died many years ago. So, I guess what I'm saying is that.
Oh wait! I'm sorry. Evidence he died many. Who are we talking about here?
Hussein?
Saddam Hussein?
Bin Laden.
Oh, Bin Laden.
Okay,
Bin
yeah.
Laden.
Okay.
My bad. Go ahead. So yeah, there's evidence that he died many years ago.
I guess what I'm saying is that we're using radical Islamic entities that are purely created. You know, there's evidence too that bin Laden is a CIA-created fictitious person so that we can focus energies on something or someone. The war on terrorism needs an individual or a group of individuals to focus on.
Right.
You got to have somebody to blame.
A scapegoat.
Correct.
Yeah. No. Do you believe, as one of our guests earlier, Mr. Jim Mars? I'm sure you may be familiar with his work. Do you believe as he does? Excuse me. Do you believe as he does that 9/11 was something that was contrived and set into place by our U.S. government?
Absolutely. The important thing about 9/11 is I don't think that we will ever get to the core of what happened. And to me, none of that really makes any difference. It doesn't matter who was responsible for 9/11. The point is that it happened. The point is that a number of laws and the Patriot Act, for example, was introduced as a result of 9/11. So let's have a look at specifics that happened immediately after and in the years preceding 9/11.
Okay.
So in other words, what was the outcome of it? It's referred to as the 9/11 Truth Movement. There are thousands of people actively trying to figure out what exactly happened on that day. There's disinformation being introduced in terms of CIA operatives who are specifically planting information on various websites to lead people astray and to just cause general confusion. So in the process, people are, in fact, they're using information replicated on websites that cannot be conclusively proven, and yet coming up with all these fantastic theories. For me, the bottom line is it was an inside job. It doesn't matter who did it, but there were a number of people involved in order to arrange the various pieces of the puzzle that needed to be brought in place for 9/11 to happen. So the point I'm trying to make is we end up spending so much time trying to get to the bottom of something that we miss the bigger picture. And there is a far bigger picture. 9/11 was introduced so that we could have a rapid escalation of fear surrounding the war on terror, so that laws can be implemented which will assist and speed up the implementation of a global police state.
Do you think that this is leading? Obviously, it's leading to the government trampling on our sacred Bill of Rights here. Obviously, it's leading to a state of fear that the government has caused in order to pass these new laws and to pass these new ideas and get them through without any kind of resistance. But do you believe that the United States government is going to at one point in time go into a state of martial law, perhaps?
Absolutely. That can't be very far away at all. Fairly recently, we had bomb scares on flights between England and the U.S.
Yes.
And as a result, nowadays, any flight traveling internationally from the U.S., you can't take any hand luggage on you. Now, all of these things are being implemented gradually. 20 years ago, if you'd said to somebody, you won't be able to take hand luggage onto a plane, they would have laughed at you. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
If 2 years from now, I'm going to make a prediction that within 2 years, international travel will be banned. Now, that's a ludicrous statement. There's no possibility that we're going to ban international travel. But because things are happening so quickly, I'm pretty convinced that within 2 years, you will not be able to fly outside of the U.S. unless you've been cleared you're going to have to go through a whole process of, I'm told that by January next year, you are going to have a valid passport as well as ID documentation, photographic ID documentation to be able to move anywhere. Now, these things would have been incomprehensible prior to 9/11, but because we're now using the war on terror as justification for all of these laws to be implemented, people are accepting them, and slowly freedoms are being destroyed. What we need to keep in mind is that the police states or martial law that will be declared in the U.S. will place the U.S. in pretty much the same situation as Hitler's Reichstag.
No, you're correct on that. The Reichstag was blamed on communists, and that was the excuse
Right.
Hitler used to it wasn't martial law, but to
used force
usurp
to
it with the executive branch.
making the communists the great enemies in Germany.
There are certainly tremendous parallels between 9/11 and the Reichstag fire. The same laws were implemented using another patsy excuse to bring the laws into power. So we need to learn from history. Let's look what happened in Germany, and the same thing will come to the U.S. Now, for me, the second part of martial law.
Well, I want to stop you there for a second, Mike, if I can.
Sure.
Do you think that this past election that had just arrived allowed the Democrats to take back control of the Congress and the Senate? Do you think that is any indication by the people that hey, we don't want our civil liberties stomped on anymore? Do you think that's it, or they're just fed up and it's cyclical?
I don't believe that elections are in any case dictated by the people voting themselves. We know that although Democrats and Republicans have very different policies, at the end of the day, in fact, we need to ask ourselves in a year's time, what policy specifically will change as a result of the change of a political system? We've already acknowledged that there are people in power behind the names that we currently recognize as our leaders. So, somebody else is pulling the strings, whether Republican, Democrat, all of that is just noise in the scheme of things. So I don't believe we're going to see major changes at all. It may be somewhat of a reflection of people being fed up with the existing system. I must admit, the whole process of democracy, the whole voting, it's a complete sham. It's a waste of taxpayers' money.
All right. Yeah. So I take it you didn't vote in the last election.
I haven't voted in more than 20 years, and no intention of doing it. It's a complete waste of time.
Are you registered to vote in the U.S.?
Chuck wanted to know if you were registered to vote in the United States.
No, not in the U.S.
Okay. No. Go. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead and finish up your thought there. You were going into the second part of it. If you can remember what it was you were on, the track you were on.
Yeah, the comment I just wanted to make is when we're talking about World War III and police states and martial law, etc., I believe personally that the biggest impact to be felt by the man on the street is going to be economically as opposed to militarily. When we talk about a world war, the immediate reaction is to think of nuclear explosions and gun battles in the street and tanks rolling down the road, that sort of thing. I believe the biggest impact is pretty much going to be far more economically than military. In other words, bank accounts are going to be frozen, massive hyperinflation, much the same as we saw in Germany in 1933, all of a sudden unable to purchase things that right now you take for granted, things that are, bread and water and milk and the real basics of life. You're not going to be able to purchase them. You'll walk into your local Walmart and there won't be items on the shelf for you to buy. A modern-day example of what I think we can expect is Zimbabwe. They have inflation of more than 150% per year. Many of the supermarkets just have nothing on the shelves anymore. There are people doing very well, even though society around them is crumbling. But I guess all I'm doing is giving examples. If we want a good feeling for what we can expect, go and look at other countries around us where similar things have been implemented.
Every Halloween at midnight, the devil simultaneously appears in two places: the high plains of India and a quiet cemetery in Kansas. It's November 2nd, the Day of the Dead. Two federal marshals report to the small town of Shinbone, Kansas, moments after a tornado warning, to transport a prisoner with no past, no identity. He is known only as Sin Jin Smith. Starring Roddy Piper, Richard Tyson, Jonathan Davis, Kevin Gage, Gary Casper, John Philbin, Billy Duffy, Charles Cypers, and Eileen Dietz. Check out the movie that critics are calling one of 2007's most anticipated horror films by visiting www.sinjinsmith.com. That's www.sin-jinsmyth.com. St. Jin Smith is a Snapkick Productions film, written and directed by Ethan Detmeyer. Coming soon to a theater near you.
And you're back to World Unexplained with Michael Haupt. The number, again, the two numbers are 1-877-722-7382. That is 1-877-SCARE-U2.
That's right, SCARE-U2.
And we got a local number. It is 1-336-996-1596. And don't forget to hop into the chat room if you're phone shy.
Yeah, if you go to worldoftheunexplained.com, you can click on the chat button on the front page, and that'll bring you into the chat room. We're having a party right now.
That's right. It's hopping in there. I had a question stemming back to the similarity between the the future police state of the United States and the Reichstag in Germany. And in the Reichstag, they use the communists as sort of scapegoats to control power, much like we would be using the terrorists to create a police state. Now, the difference is, from what I see, is the Reichstag had a very charismatic leader in Adolf Hitler.
You don't think George Bush is a charismatic?
No, George Bush. I mean, we
cheerleader, charismatic cheerleader.
We know that George Bush is not eloquent and not charismatic.
Dead or alive.
I mean, yeah, he's just basically. I mean, I'm not giving Hitler any kind of credence whatsoever, but he was charismatic, and so
he was a very good speaker.
Right, and so in this future police state, who would be running it? I mean, would these shadowy forms who've been controlling things from the scenes, will they step out in the limelight, or would they just throw another king with a crown and stand behind the throne, so to speak?
You raised some very good points. I don't have a strong opinion on this. Yes, I certainly believe that Bush will be replaced at some point. I agree with you that he's not charismatic enough to lead, particularly the U.S. But remember, we're looking for a global leader. We're moving towards a one world order,
okay.
And there will be an individual who eventually arrives, and I believe it's in the not-too-distant future, who will almost rise out of the ashes of a destroyed society. There'll be economic panic, there will be military crises happening all over the world, and people will be in an immense state of fear, almost paralyzed, unable to think for themselves, and looking for anybody that they can turn to and place their faith in and follow without question. Much the same as the way German people followed Adolf Hitler.
Do you believe
that person?
Do you believe
who it's going to be? I don't know.
Okay.
Do you believe that person is the Antichrist?
No, is the short answer.
Okay.
We'll get onto that when we start talking about biblical prophecies and so on. I don't believe he'll be the Antichrist, but he will possibly lead us into a stage of world development that's very different to what we're used to now. Everything we take for granted right now will be completely different, and many people will refer to him as the Antichrist, no doubt. My views are slightly different on that, and we can get onto that when we start talking about biblical prophecy.
Okay. Now you had mentioned earlier, we had talked, and you had mentioned something about the occult numerology of what's going on here with the doomsday prophecy. What are you talking about there?
Very simply, what I mean there is a sign that's placed on major world events, and typically those signs use three different sciences. The first is numerology, the second astrology, and the third is sacred geometry. So what do I mean by all of that? Well, in numerology, calendar dates are added or subtracted to get numeric base significance. And I'm going to give some examples so that we know what we're talking about.
Okay.
Within astrology, we're talking about celestial alignments. And then within sacred geometry, we're looking at specific geometric locations. I'm talking about latitude and longitude numbers. So when you take all of these three sciences together, throw them in a basket, we can usually, in hindsight, track back and see that occult signatures are placed on major world events. Now, before I get into examples and a bit more detail of what I mean by that, let's talk about the numbers themselves. The most venerated occult numbers are 6, 11, 13, and multiples of those numbers. So specifically doubling them, so 22, 33, 44, 55, 66, etc., and a triplication. Now the most well-known triplication is 666, which is the number of the beast. The point is those three numbers, 6, 11, 13, the base numbers, are the three most important numbers, and by using those three numbers, including doubles and triplications, we see a number of patterns throughout world history. When we talk about latitude and longitude, the 33rd degree parallel is a very common line of latitude. You can do your own research into instances where a disaster, war, or murder, or an assassination has occurred on the 33rd parallel. There's an excellent book called Masons and Mystery at the 33rd parallel.
Okay, I was getting ready to mention the Masons there with their 33rd degrees.
What are some of the examples?
Yes.
What are some of the examples of that?
I'm certainly going to get onto that. If I may just quickly mention...
go right ahead.
an obvious question is, well, why on earth would planners or perpetrators of these events want to stamp their signature over major world events? I think a modern-day example from the movies is the Spanish Zorro, Spaniard Zorro, who would go all over the place in his black cloak and doing all sorts of dastardly deeds. And when he left the scene of a crime, he would slash a big Z, making a statement saying that it was me who did this, I'm in control. And pretty much the same thing is happening right now. So for perpetrators who are planning these major world events, and remember we've kind of accepted now that there is a conspiratorial view of history, so events are planned. So they do this, they place their signature on these events for two reasons. Number one, they want to hide the truth from the masses, but at the same time communicating their success to those in the know, to the elite. So in World War II, for example, public radio broadcasts were used to transmit secret messages to resistance members. And I believe exactly the same thing is happening right now.
Okay.
They also believe that a planned crisis won't be successful unless it's carried out by the numbers. Now, this comes from a view that we have a satanic power in place behind global world leaders. And unless they're doing things by these occult numbers, they believe that things won't be successful. So 9/11 is a specific example, and I'll talk about the numbers on that. But to get some examples going back through history, let's start with World War I. World War I was officially declared over on November the 11th, 1918, at 11 a.m. So there's a whole stack of 11s in there. 11th of November, 1918 at 11 a.m.
Okay.
And remember, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail. Eventually all these numbers just become too much. The point is there is a mass of evidence. If we look at each individual event on its own, one can argue, okay, there's a fair amount of coincidence involved in there. But when you look throughout history, the number of coincidences are just so overwhelmingly impossible to achieve statistically that one eventually has to believe, okay, there is a pattern, and it does appear as if this occult signature is something that works. So let's have a look at a little more. The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Now, it landed in Hiroshima or Hiroshima, depending on how you pronounce it, Japan. Now, that's right next to the 33rd degree latitude line on the globe. It was also 33 days after the 169th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So the 169th anniversary is 13 multiplied by 13. 13 is one of the important base numbers. So we've got 33 days after that anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Another person that was assassinated on the 33rd degree latitude was President John F. Kennedy.
Yes.
Now, he made a speech 10 days before he was assassinated in which he said, "The high office of the president has been used to foment a plot to destroy the Americans' freedom, and before I leave office, I must inform the citizens of this plight." So he knew what was going on, or I believe he stumbled across a number of truths and was concerned about it and was about to tell the people, but he was assassinated. So he made a speech on the 22nd of October, 1962. It was called the 13 Days of October speech. And exactly 13 months after that speech, he was assassinated. So there's a whole stack of 11s, 22s, 13s, and so on. But the most important point is that he was assassinated in Dealey Plaza, which is on the 33rd degree parallel line. That's in Dallas, Texas. So there's some examples there. Now, World Trade Center, you're probably aware of some of these numbers. The two buildings were 110 stories tall, so there's your 11. The first flight to hit was Flight 11. The flight that hit the Pentagon was Flight 77. So we can see all these multiples and numerals of 11s coming up. Yeah. Immediately after the incident, there were 11 days of mourning declared until September 22. On the first anniversary of September 11th, the New York City lottery balls came up and ended as 911.
Oh, wow.
They also arranged the Chicago Stock Exchange S&P 500 to end on precisely 911 points. This was on the 1 year anniversary of September 11th.
Wow.
They then followed that up later, 6 months after September 11th. They had a number of lights shining up into the sky to replicate the two buildings. Now, they used 88 lights, 44 for each tower. So there's the 11 multiplied by 8 or multiplied by 4. The lights shone for 33 nights from March the 11th to April the 13th. And the lights were turned off at 11 p.m. every night. So the whole stack of 11s around incidents that happened around 9/11. There's plenty more. I'm just giving a taste of it, just a few examples.
Okay.
We can talk about the Bali bombings in Indonesia.
Let me stop you just for a second. If any of you guys want to call in and speak with Michael Haupt, the number here is 877-SCARE-U2. That's 877-722-7382, 877-SCARE-U2, or locally 336-996-1596. And those numbers are on the front page of our website at worldoftheunexplained.com. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. I was just moving on to some more examples of how this occult signature is used. Another common, when they're using elapsed days or dates between two different events, that's a very common way of calculating or noticing an occult signature. And another common elapsed time is 1 year, 1 month, 1 day. So when we look at major world events, if you look at elapsed times between two major world events, you will often see that coming up. And the first bomb blast in Bali, Indonesia, had exactly that stamp on it. It was 1 year, 1 month, 1 day after September 11th. So the first bomb blast was October 12th, 2002.
Okay.
And another example is using time. On May the 1st, 2003, President Bush landed on aircraft carrier USS Abraham, but he specifically timed his flight to land at 3:33 p.m. So there's a whole series of threes on that particular day. The Madrid train bombing in Europe, in Spain, on March the 11th, 2004, that was 911 days after September 11th.
God.
It was also 333 days before June the 6th, 2006. That date is 060606.
It takes a lot to the people behind this. It would take a lot to sit down and figure out all this stuff.
And to engineer it.
Yeah, to engineer it to make it happen just at a certain amount of time. I mean, who do you think's behind all this planning?
Well, there are many people that believe the plan is satanic. And in fact, some of the timing may be pure coincidence, but because there are satanic forces behind these things. So the point being that it's sometimes not possible for a human to come up and work out all of these dates and times, and so these things may well be happening, and in hindsight, the satanic plan becomes... Does that make sense? Another way of looking at the satanic plan is that there has been a steady progression over a number of generations. Now, it's impossible for a human to pass on this kind of grand-scale plan and thinking from generation to generation. And that, to me, indicates that there is an otherworldly or a non-human element to what we see happening around us. You can see a steady progression, and if that was planned, it would be impossible for one human to think all of these things out.
Now, what are your beliefs? Can I get into the religious aspect, the biblical aspect at this point, or do you want to go somewhere else?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you think that these things that are coming about, do they relate to biblical prophecy in your opinion?
Firstly, let me give a little bit of background just as far as religion is concerned. I come from a very religious background, a Christian background. So for many years I was actively involved in a Christian church. When I say actively involved, not only in attending, but also taking part in leading various activities and so on. So that's my background.
Okay, good. Well, so far you seem like a good guy, Michael. Let's not spoil it. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
You haven't got to know me yet. My views have changed slightly since then, because I believe there is something beyond Christianity, or in fact any of the 5 major world religions, which is true spirituality. Now, we won't get into that right now. Maybe that's a discussion for another day. However, when we look at biblical prophecy, remember that the Bible has been around for a number of thousand years. If we talk about the Old Testament, some of those books are dated as old as 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, if we take the entire Bible, the Bible was certainly around before World War I, World War II, and the now coming World War III. My point is that in whichever age you're reading that Bible, the prophecies were relevant. So an individual reading the Bible at around the time World War I was breaking out, they would have said, oh, look, it's biblical revelation, biblical prophecy. We're reaching Armageddon. It's the end of the world. And, everything is going to come crumbling down. Exactly the same as what we're saying now. So my point is that more than 100 years ago, the Bible was just as relevant within current circumstances then as it is now.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in regards to a one world leader. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
At the time, it would have been Adolf Hitler. People were saying, well, this is the Antichrist.
Yeah, I'm saying at the time, people would have said, yeah, this is Adolf Hitler, but we all know that he didn't end up controlling the entire world. But what I'm saying is you're telling me that a one world leader is coming, and that's why I'm asking, don't you see those parallels to any kind of biblical prophecy?
I certainly see parallels. The difference compared to where most Christian people would come from is they would say that we are reaching the end of the world, and that we're going to Armageddon is typically the total destruction of the earth as we see it right now. Where my view is slightly different. I agree that we're reaching the end of an age, but it's not the end of the world. So we will move from an existing age, which I believe now is an information age, to a new age, which none of us are sure what that's going to be. But when I say that everything that we take for granted right now will be different, our whole concept of money, our whole concept of relationships, our interaction with other people, our philosophies, our way of viewing spirituality, all of that is going to change dramatically. And what we're seeing right now is the groanings of an earth reaching almost the limit of development that mankind is currently able to achieve. So within human advancement, there are inherent limitations which eventually cause that system to break down. The fall of the Roman Empire is an example most commonly quoted. And I believe we're at that same phase in mankind's development. Our advances have been so significant, so rapid, that at the same time it's introduced limitations within the system, and that system has to collapse and break and fall and then move into a totally new age. And that to me is where biblical prophecy comes in. It's not Armageddon in that all of us are going to be destroyed and we'll go to hell. It simply means that we will go through a period of difficulty in preparation for moving us into a new age. It was Albert Einstein who said, a problem cannot be solved using the same thinking that created the problem in the first place. So, coming back to biblical prophecy, we need to move into that age where totally new thinking can be created, so that new solutions, not using the existing thinking that we're using now, can be implemented. That's possibly a little esoteric. Did some of that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I was just letting you, So where do you think this is going? I mean, what kind of timeline are we looking at?
Interesting that you raised the timeline question. I think for humans, because we're so focused on time, our entire day is controlled by the clock. So we wake up at a certain time, we have to be at work at a certain time, we have to eat meals at a certain time. So everything does revolve around time. And it's the question I receive most frequently: what is the time scale? The short answer is I don't know, because if we've accepted, as we discussed previously, that this is a satanically inspired plan, time is of no concern to them whatsoever. It's a completely different dimension where time means nothing. So if it's true that there are demonic forces behind what we see happening right now, then we have to immediately remove the question of time. But that makes it very difficult for us as humans to understand the whole concept. So for me, my personal timescale is the next 6 years, specifically December 21st, 2012, which is the end of the Mayan calendar.
I knew it.
All right, it's coming.
I knew it.
I don't place a lot of emphasis on the Mayan calendar specifically. I mean, it's a fascinating study, and it is amazing what those guys came up with. It's purely to choose a date, almost at random, and here's a date that seems to make sense to me because it's a timescale of around 6 years. If we look at the way current developments have rapidly escalated, I believe within 6 years we're going to see such rapid changes that you will have a global leader arising, and people will refer to him as the Antichrist. So that's my personal timescale.
Let me go back for a second. You said that a lot of this could be brought on by some satanic forces at work. Now, if you believe in these satanic forces and you believe in these demonic or these diabolical presences, I mean, doesn't that play into the whole Bible thing?
You could take it one step further and say, well, if we believe in a creator of the universe, God is what most people refer to him as, is the evil side of what we see happening around us, is that not also part of God? So in other words, most Christians will refer to God as only an all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing being, but usually in a good sense. Now, the most difficult concept to get your head around is that the demonic forces or the demonic side of what we see happening is in fact part of God, because he is perfect. He has to be all-encompassing. So, a lot of a concept that a lot of Christians get hung up on is, why is God allowing all of the turmoil that we see happening around us? Because he is perfect, because he is God. This is assuming you believe in a power like that. I'm sure you will have many people who don't believe that there is a God.
Well, that's kind of where I'm trying to nail you down at, though, Michael. That's what I'm trying to see. So you believe that you've, I guess, evolved from Christianity and moved on to a higher plane of existence. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I want to be careful of choosing the right words here. I don't believe it's a higher plane of existence, not at all. I certainly believe that the five major world religions, of which Christianity is the second highest number of adherents, we've been taught to follow dogma. We've been taught to believe only what the man up in the pulpit teaches us on a Sunday or Saturday or wherever your Sabbath is. And it removes us from the freedom of expressing oneself in true spirituality. We're going to get into a fair amount of detail here, which is going a little off topic from what we started at. But yes, I believe that once you break free from a man-made tradition, a man-made religion, there is a far more exciting, fulfilling, wondrous spiritual experience that has nothing to do with the Bible or any other religious text. The amazing thing to me is that within the five major world religions, there are so many similarities between each religion. They all have a religious leader. They all say they are the only path to spiritual enlightenment. They all say that any other religion is damned. So you're either with us or you're against us.
That's not true, though. Let me stop you there for a second. Islam doesn't say that. Islam says that they call the Jews and the Christians people of the book, and they say that all the people of the book will be judged accordingly to their own beliefs on Judgment Day. I mean, that's straight out of the Quran, and they're not saying that theirs is the only way. They even talk about Christ returning and battling the Antichrist, and they say when Christ returns, he'll proclaim to the world that he's actually not really the Son of God, but just a prophet like Muhammad. Now,
right.
Here on this show, we're conservative paranormal talk. We think that's a bunch of bunk. So, we're big on gods and big on guns, by God. So,
you said plural.
Did I use plural? I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
But we're big on God, big on gun. Our guests are usually big on gods, and we're big on guns here. We're in the South. We're in the Bible Belt. You have to understand.
Okay.
So, but I mean. I don't know. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of similarities between all of the major world religions, but I guess just the idea of this, I just can't get,
unifying force.
Yeah, this whole one world leader thing. It just kind of let's move past this though. I want to talk about RFID chips and things like that, but we're going to have to take a short break here in just a second. So let me remind people that they can call you and speak with you live here, 877-722-7382. We know you guys are out there. That's 877-SCARE-U2, or locally 336-996-1596. And you can speak with Michael Haupt.
Roswell, UFOs, flying saucers, alien abduction, Are we alone? Information regarding this and many other questions about the unknown are only a click away at www.theufostore.com. TheUFOstore.com offers hundreds of DVDs about UFOs, aliens, crop circles, conspiracies, Bigfoot, suppressed science, ancient mysteries, and the latest DVD releases like Dan Aykroyd Unplugged on UFOs and the Alien Files 5 DVD set. TheUFOstore.com also offers the book Roswell, It Really Happened by Jesse Marcel, one of the last survivors of the Roswell UFO crash that examined the spacecraft wreckage in 1947, revealing its hidden secrets. Log on to www.theufostore.com and request a free UFO Store catalog. To receive a free catalog by mail, call 541-523-2630. That's 541-523-2630. TheUFOstore.com, the largest selection of UFO products on the internet.
And we're back on World of the Unexplained. We've got a caller, Ugly George from New York. Ugly George, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Michael, you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. George has a question for you. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, Michael, my family comes from Russia, and you touch on something very interesting called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. That exists. I have a copy of it.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Okay, it does exist, and it's a very damning presentation. Among other things, it says that Jews waylay and kidnap Christian children and eat them ritually.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Now, that does exist. However, we all know who really wrote that. Okay? The Tsarist secret police, I don't expect you to know this, was known as the Okhrana.
I knew that.
And it's very interesting if you study the Okhrana, because you will find every tactic, every false flag operation, every agent provocateur. They were the masters par excellence of all the things that you're talking about 100 years later. With the 9/11, the false flag, raising up Osama bin Laden, things like that. This was all done over 100 years ago in Tsarist Russia by the secret police.
Right.
They would create agents, and I have to tell you this name. One of their informers, who pretended to be a great revolutionary, his real name is Yosef Vissarionovich Zhugashvili.
Stalin.
But that was a little hard to pronounce, so he called himself Stalin.
Yeah, Trent, by the way, my co-host is actually fluent in Russian.
I wouldn't say fluent, but yeah.
Well, pretty near close.
I know
to
it
fluent.
fairly well. But go on.
Okay. So anyway, if you study the Tsarist Okhrana, you will find all the forgeries, all the numerology, and all the things that you're talking about today. But, Michael, here's, I think, the main point that I'd like to make. Again, this is Ugly George in New York. You keep talking about leaders and nations and religions and ideologies. I think you're leaving out the most important word, which is above all of them. And it's a four-letter word ending in K. The word is bank, B-A-N-K. And by no coincidence, when General Pike talked about starting Israel or, forming a Palestine again and things like that, it was never successful for more than 25 years until a certain conclave took place. And it took place in a very unlikely place. A hilly, mountainous country, which had very few Jews in it. The few Jews that were there tended to herd cows. They were not particularly important, most of them. And yet the modern Zionist movement sprang, by no coincidence, from Switzerland. And I think that's where the word bank comes into play.
All right.
Now, you had something you wanted to say about the Bible?
Yes, and what I wanted to say about the Bible was, you people being very modern people from the 21st century, you may not really understand that throughout history there was no such thing as the people. There was a word in every language that translated as the rabble, the filthy peasants, the unwashed. And then there was another word that translated as the elite. So everybody keeps saying the Hebrews, the ancient Israelites, they were holy, the Bible was holy. 99% of the Israelites were dumb, stupid peasants who were sheep herders, essentially, and most of them illiterate. All the women were illiterate, except the noble women, and very few men could read and write. So who did read read and write the Bible. And that was the 1% of the leaders. The Greeks have a word for this. They call it the theocracy. Theo means God. Krasi comes from kratin, meaning to rule, meaning the rule of those who claim to be God or claim to rule in the name of God. So 1% of the Hebrews wrote the Bible, wrote the books of the Old Testament. 1% of them interpreted the books, and 1% of them threw out anything that they didn't agree with. The Greeks, as usual, have a word for that. They call it apocrypha. And apocrypha has come to mean something that's not true or something that's false or ridiculous. What it simply means is that which is not approved by the ruling clique.
Yeah. It was out of the canon.
Yeah, for example, you will never see, and I have never seen, the Gospel of St. Thomas, because Thomas tells a much different story than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But that's been suppressed. And I wonder if, Mike, if you could somehow get a hold of a copy of the Gospel of St. Thomas.
You've raised some excellent points there, quite a few that you raised. The Gospel of Thomas is online somewhere. I've read it. Somebody has transcribed it. I don't have the address with me right now. The other is the Essene Gospels. So there are a number of religious texts that have not been included in the Bible. And the same is true of religious texts from other religions too. Your example is a very good one, of the fact that only 1% of the population wrote the Bible. It's pretty much the same if a Martian came down to our Earth and found a book, a classic, let's say, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The Martian wouldn't immediately assume, oh, well, all of the inhabitants of Earth think the same way as the author of this particular book. And the same is true of the Bible. You're right. It wasn't the thinking of the masses that is represented in the book. But you would also be aware, George, of the number of changes that have happened to the Bible throughout history. Now,
yes, but you know that they have to be approved by the ruling Sanhedrin.
And in today's day and age, who approves new translations coming out now? Who acknowledges whether it's a correct translation of the original Greek or not?
Well, I don't want to sound too conspiratorial, but it's amazing that 60 years after that little Bedouin shepherd discovered the
Qumran, Dead Sea Scrolls.
Qumran,
yeah.
Do you know that many of them have never been released by the so-called Israeli scholars? Very likely because they differ from the officially accepted text.
Very certain. Wow.
You know, the Israeli government has official control over those parchments, and it's now almost 60 years after they were discovered. Most of them have never been released. They don't seem to want to release them or to translate them correctly. And they have various excuses for not doing that.
Well, George, we're going to have to let you go and open up the lines. But thank you for calling and speaking with Michael Haupt. We appreciate it.
Fantastic. Could I just mention one last word? I wish Michael would talk more about BANKS.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
okay.
George.
Thanks, man. All right, bye.
And that was Ugly George from New York.
That's true.
All right, Mike.
Yeah.
Hey, that's one of your subscribers there, putting you to task.
I guess so.
I believe so. Yeah.
Gospel
Now
Thomas.
you can see Michael's website at www.3worldwars.com.
Yeah.
That's 3 World Wars, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure. Trent said something else. I want to make sure I was right.
Did I?
Yeah, I thought you said Third World War.
No,
And okay. Maybe I'm hearing wrong today. Go right ahead. Let's go back into what you were talking about earlier, though, Mike, or wherever you want to steer this conversation.
Well, perhaps just to pick up from what George was saying, the controversy surrounding the Bible is pretty intense. If you start researching the number of different translations that have made their way to bookshelves, there is such discrepancies between major thoughts within the Bible. An example is the day of the Sabbath. Now, in Jesus' time, the Sabbath was on a Saturday. Nowadays, the Sabbath is on a Sunday. Who changed that, and under whose authority was that changed? And if I believe the Sabbath is on a Sunday, does that make me a biblicist, or does it make me a Christian? And there are subtle differences between the two, and yet those subtle differences become core issues. Now, to me, is it possible, or think just for a moment, that the Bible could be a manual that describes in some detail the spiritual laws of the universe or the immutable laws of nature? We all operate and live under laws of nature. The easiest example to use is the law of gravity. Whether you understand it or not, it still works on you. It never changes its effect, no matter where we are in the world. It's a law of nature. Now, there's a law of attraction. And to me, the Bible, in many places, talks about the law of attraction, but without ever using those words. Part of the law of attraction is showing gratitude. And that's perhaps why we give thanks for a meal. That process of giving thanks and showing gratitude attracts good things into your life. Now, those are based in very sound principles, very sound laws of nature. Now, to me, that's perhaps what the Bible is, as well as many other textbooks. They are almost metaphors or allegories of laws that we need to experience and learn for ourselves. It's not something that a teacher can stand up at a board and teach these things to us. They are experiential lessons that we have to go through. So for me, any religion is a very important part in an expanding and evolving spirituality. It's not something that we can do without. It's a necessary phase that we have to go through. But true spirituality, I believe, transcends any of these major world religions. Maybe we don't need to dwell on this much more.
Yeah, let's move this along.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Did you want to go to Jay? Did you have other questions?
Yeah, anybody else that has any other questions as far as our call-in numbers, 877-SCARE-YOU2. You can pick that up and call in, just like Ugly George from New York did. 877-SCARE-YOU2 or 336-996-1596.
That's right.
I just wanted to keep. I wanted to kind of. He had mentioned banks, and I don't know.
Yeah.
If,
what is that?
What do you think of banking and financial institutions? I'm assuming that's what he was talking about.
Okay.
He was talking about the protocols
Yeah.
of Zion.
Oh, he was talking about the protocols. Okay, all right. Well, that messed me up then. Obviously, I'm not well informed. I feel like an idiot now. That's okay.
I believe it was proven to be a fraud too.
Okay.
I don't believe it's legitimate.
Okay, Chuck believes it's a fraud.
That's what he said right up front at the beginning of the show.
Well, let's move into another realm though. Let's talk about these RFID chips that are so popular now and under so much scrutiny. What do you think these are going to be used for, Mike?
Very simply to track the movements of people, but more specifically to reduce the free movement of people, either between states within the U.S. or internationally between countries. At the end of the day, the only objective that the controllers want to achieve is a total lockdown on any of our personal freedoms. Now, there was a time when driving a car didn't even require a license.
Yeah.
You could buy a Model T Ford from Henry Ford, and that's it. You were on the road, and you were able to operate that vehicle without any form of paperwork, without any form of restrictions. And slowly that changed, and we had to have a driver's license, and then we had to have cameras that checked on our speed, and we had to have all sorts of paraphernalia around us to reduce those freedoms. The argument would be, well, it's supposed to improve road safety and reduce the number of lives lost. The underlying message of that is that we as individuals cannot be held responsible for living life the way it should be lived. So we need to introduce laws and government control. So that same analogy with driving licenses is going to be extended into RFID chips. For those who don't know, it's very simply a method of holding a huge amount of information about you, your biometric data, your medical history, all sorts of information that's relevant to agencies who wish to know everything about you will be stored on some form of electronic media or information so that it can be easily read from you. Now, that could either be on a credit card, it could be on some other form of electronic file that you may have to carry with you. And again, if we're looking for parallels in history, during Hitler's time in Germany, a very common phrase that would bring fear into the heart of anybody walking around in the streets of Germany was, "Show me your papers." Now, we're very quickly getting to that same point in the US currently. Now, it may not be "show me your papers," but "show me your RFID chip," or whatever it may be. So it's purely a method, a tool to restrict individual freedoms. And we're not far away. We've heard of a number of Very Chip is a major U.S. manufacturer that are already making these chips, are already inserting them into animals to test them. Individuals have already voluntarily taken them on in their body under their skin of their hand. So it's not far away.
Now, who's in control of this? Is it the Illuminati? Is it the Masons? Is it the reptilian agenda that we hear about with David Icke and those kinds of people? Is it extraterrestrials? What is it?
The minute we start asking the question, who is it, we're missing the bigger picture. We're starting to get involved into detail that isn't relevant. So, yeah, it could be shape-shifting reptiles. I personally think that idea is ludicrous, but maybe it is.
Come on
maybe
now.
It isn't. That doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there is a group of people who we will never meet personally, so therefore why do we need to know who they are? But there is a group of people pushing for this reduction in individual liberties and freedoms. That, to me, is the issue that needs to be discussed, not who they are. Many people write to me via the website saying, we need to identify who these people are so we can take action against them. There is nothing that you or I can do, or even a large number of people, to stop the progress that we've already seen. The momentum gained already is so huge that at most we may delay it by months or years, but it's not going to change the course of history. That's my personal belief, and as a result, I don't take part in any protests. I think it was Mother Teresa who said she would never go to an anti-war demonstration, but she would go to a pro-peace demonstration. There's a big difference between, again, this is the law of attraction that we've touched on, and we certainly don't have enough time to go into it now. The minute you focus on, or what you focus on becomes reality in your life. So all of these anti-war demonstrations are focusing on war. The universe doesn't understand the difference between positive and negative, meaning I'm focusing on war. Whether I'm against war or for war, I'm still focusing on war. And that process sets up a resonance, a frequency, an electronic imbalance focused on war. So we're going to continue seeing war as long as we see anti-war protests. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just curious though. It seems a rather dismal forecast for us. Then, if there's nothing we can do.
But to me, it's not dismal. It's realistic. It's a case of saying we've seen the trends. Yes, it's not pretty. Yes, it doesn't look appealing to us. But there are certain things that we can do as individuals to prepare ourselves and profit. Now, during the Big Depression, during World War I, during World War II, there were elements of people who survived and prospered and did very well. And I believe it's our challenge to educate and inform ourselves sufficiently so that we can prosper, no matter what happens when things start going horribly wrong. You may be aware that there's a plan to reduce the world's population from 6 or 6.5 billion to around 2 billion. So there's going to be a huge loss of life. Now, we could berate the fact and try and stop that process and identify the individuals behind the plan and try and take them out, or whatever the case may be. Or we could say, well, that's reality. That's where we're at in this stage of mankind's development. Instead of me trying to fight what I see happening anyway, how can I prepare myself and my family so that we can take advantage of whatever happens around us?
Okay, we got another
far more positive way.
We got another caller.
Great.
Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, my name's Chris from New Jersey.
Oh, hey.
How's it going, Chris?
Hey.
What's your question for Mike?
The first thing that I wanted to ask was, I had just in the past 3-4 months been seeing repetitive numbers, like you see it on a clock or a watch or, a cell phone, whatever, time and just things. I've been seeing a lot of repeat numbers, and when I stumbled upon his site, researching things that tied into Albert Pike, I came across the repetitive numbers when he talks about numerology and how they tied into all these events that have been happening, especially in recent years, because they're happening much more often. My question for Mike had to do with, does he see by any calculations of these repetitive distances, like in factors of 11, of any future dates? He did mention, again, December 21st, 2012. There's a lot that I do agree with him on, like probably 90% of everything that I've caught on his site, and even listening to him tonight, agree with a lot of what he has to say. But there's something that's interesting that kind of ties into all this, that gets into the biblical aspects.
Okay.
And
I didn't stack these calls, Mike. I didn't. I promise you. Go right ahead.
Yeah, and I know that spirituality and religion, all this kind of stuff, gets a little sticky because everyone has their own little viewpoint on it. It really varies from person to person usually. But the one thing that I find that's interesting is that all these religions are looking for a Messiah. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but in my studies, I find that Islamics are expecting this Messiah. Christians, obviously, Jews, we want Mashiach now, all that kind of stuff. At least the three monotheistic religions are looking for the specific Messiah. And, of course, when this person comes on the scene to bring peace, the Prince of Peace, everybody's going to think he's the Messiah. And, of course, a number of, true believers are going to be able to discern and identify, that it's actually just the prequel to the real Messiah. And, there will be a lot of relief and peace and all that kind of stuff happening. It's all in the book.
So what is your question for Michael then, as far as that's concerned?
Well, really, the question I had was if he, based on the whole numerology aspect of it, because I find a lot of truths within the cult and all that other stuff too. I have through the years. It makes the Bible all that much more real. But anyway, the question had to do with, does he see any patterns within the 11, 13, 6 in terms of future dates?
Also, like a prediction, some way to predict it?
It's a little hard, kind of like the Bible code.
Oh, okay, I got you, the Bible code. Well, what do you think of that, Michael?
Yeah, my short answer as far as predictions are concerned, I generally try and avoid them wherever possible. In terms of the Bible code, I believe that's one of the biggest commercial farces ever.
All right, well, that's honest.
It's very easy to place a code on something in hindsight. So, in other words, somebody's taken a particular translation of the Bible and come up with something. There is a website called truebibledecoded.com that has a massive information, and if anything, I would go with that author's view of any particular code within the Bible. But as for Drosman and some of the other books that have come out recently, pure bunk. But that's my personal opinion.
All right, well.
Did that get it for you?
Interesting.
All right, thanks for calling. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
All right. Okay, truebibledecoded.com.
That's correct.
My producer knows a little bit about everything. He is the strangest guy I've ever met. Chuck is, and he's like shaking his head, yeah, when you mention it. He shakes his head, yeah, like a lot of times. I'll hear about something for the first time, and he's been on top of it for like years. He's like, oh yeah, I know about that. That's old.
Well, where I first saw it was this film, independent film that they won the Cannes Film Festival years back called Pi.
Oh, I saw that not too long ago.
Yeah, they have a bunch of I guess Orthodox Jews decrypting the Torah through numerology. It's pretty interesting.
It was a crazy movie. Yeah, that was pretty.
All right. Well, let's get.
It was a very small part of the film.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike. Let's get back on track.
The interesting thing about books coming out like that, I mean, authors often nowadays are motivated by money. They write books because they, trying to generate an income. And there is a need at the moment. People are genuinely asking, what on earth is going on? They can see that there is something wrong. And hence, books like these do very well, because I don't believe they provide an answer, but it's certainly posited or positioned that way, that here is an answer, turning to the book that so many people believe in, the Bible, and here is the true answer that we've managed to decode. Now, why those secrets need to be shrouded in mystery and why it takes a secular writer to uncover those secrets is a bit that baffles me.
Yeah, same here.
The point being that people are desperately searching for answers right now, and you're going to see more and more of these type of books coming out because there is a very hungry market.
Okay, we're going to take our excuse me, yeah. smoking too many cigarettes, but that's okay. I won't be around later anyway. Anyway, so
when World War III hits, Scott's gonna.
When World War III hits, I'm taking the survivalist approach. We're going to be back right here with Michael Haupt on World of the Unexplained.
Every Halloween at midnight, the devil simultaneously appears in two places: the high plains of India and a quiet cemetery in Kansas. It's November 2nd, the Day of the Dead. Two federal marshals report to the small town of Shinbone, Kansas, moments after a tornado warning, to transport a prisoner with no past, no identity. He is known only as Sin Jin Smith. Starring Roddy Piper, Richard Tyson, Jonathan Davis, Kevin Gage, Gary Casper, John Vilbin, Billy Duffy, Charles Cypers, and Eileen Dietz. Check out the movie that critics are calling one of 2007's most anticipated horror films by visiting www.sinjinsmith.com. That's www.sin-jinsmyth.com. St. Jin Smith is a Snapkick Productions film, written and directed by Ethan Detmeyer. Coming soon to a theater near you.
And we're back with Michael Haupt here on World of the Unexplained. Please give us a call, guys. We've only got a half an hour left. So you can reach us here at 877-SCARE-U2. That's 877-722-7382. Or locally, 336-996-1596.
That's right.
And I want to ask you a question, Mike, that's been burning on my mind. Where do you intend on going when this thing hits?
On a paradise island somewhere far, far away.
Can you email me those directions later, privately after the show? No.
Or there are plenty of islands in the South Pacific, Scott. You can pick one.
Okay, but no, seriously, what do you plan on being?
Area is Southeast Asia, but before we get into the details of that, firstly let me say that it's probably the most common question I'm asked by email. Most people want to know, where is the safest place on Earth if war is going to break out in the Middle East or North and South Korea or China and Taiwan or the U.S., where is a good place to be? Now, for me, certainly I would avoid mainland U.S. completely. Now, for most people, that's not possible. So if you're bound to be in the U.S., I would avoid both east and west coasts, so aim to be in the Midlands somewhere. I would avoid any major city, avoid, if possible, any city more than 1 million people. And the reason for that is simply that when you get masses panicking,
mass hysteria,
blocked, it's going to be very difficult to move anywhere. So at the end of the day, we're trying to achieve a lifestyle where you're completely adaptable, completely flexible, where you can do anything at a moment's notice without being too concerned about what's happening around you. If you're in a major city like LA or New York, when everybody else is trying to get out of the city at the same time, you're trapped, and immediately your freedoms that you've worked so hard to work on are restricted by the rest of the masses. So if it's not possible to get completely out of the U.S., at least try and avoid major cities.
Okay.
For me,
well, that makes sense.
What if you can get out of the U.S.?
If you can get out of the U.S., I would aim for Southern Hemisphere as opposed to Northern Hemisphere. You will see, when World War III does break out, you'll see a concentration within the Northern Hemisphere, so specifically around Europe, specifically around the U.S., Taiwan and China, and North and South Korea. You'll notice that all of those, and the Middle East, you'll notice that all of those regions are in the Northern Hemisphere. If you're going to have nuclear holocausts happening, you will have a nuclear cloud drifting, but it will remain within the Northern Hemisphere because of the wind patterns and so on. So if you're concerned about nuclear fallout, the safest places are going to be in the Southern Hemisphere.
Okay. So trip to the U.S., Scott.
I'm sorry?
I would certainly also avoid any continents. This is taking it now to the extreme, because at the same time as seeing economic depressions and military conflagrations, we're also going to see an increase in natural disasters. And we've already seen some indication of that. So there's going to be major earthquakes, there are going to be floods, there are going to be hurricanes, etc., etc. We'll see more and more of those. So if possible, it is better the ideal location, as for me personally, is a mountainous island region. And there are a number of islands that fit those characteristics. The main advantage of an island is that, generally speaking, laws on an island are far less strict than on a mainland. So, for example, one of the Thai islands that I was on very recently, you can drive around on a motorbike with no helmet. There are no policemen, nobody to stop you and check on your speed. If you're injured or you're killed on your motorbike, that's your problem. And to me, that's the way life should be. And we shouldn't have to have a police force to enforce that. Yeah. So your lifestyle is that much more free and more enjoyable on an island than within a major city. So personally for me, a number of islands within Southeast Asia, specifically Thailand, because I spent a lot of time there and I've got to know the Thai people, wonderful, laid-back, friendly people. It's very cheap to live there. Another option is Fiji, South Pacific, any of the islands around there. Cook Islands are a beautiful, beautiful set of islands in the middle of nowhere. And that is a disadvantage as well. If you need to get to anywhere, it is sometimes more difficult getting around easily. Hawaii is also an option for U.S. citizens, provided they don't turn it into a naval base if things become out of hand in that region. So there's just some ideas. However, the important thing about preparing ourselves for whatever happens next is not necessarily where you're going to end up. It's more developing a mental attitude which I call cultural agility. And that very simply means to be able to adapt and morph and become like a chameleon and just change and fit in with circumstances as they happen. For most of us, that's very difficult to do. And I'll use a simple example, housing. Most of us have grown up to expect and take for granted that we have to own our real estate. And we have to work for years and years and years to pay off a mortgage. And that whole mindset develops around just the simple example of a house. It means that we don't have the ability to just leave everything behind and move very quickly. Normally, when somebody relocates internationally, there's a whole drama about getting rid of, selling the house, making sure that you make enough profit on it. And it's nobody would ever just lock their door and walk away from their house.
So I take it you rent.
I beg your pardon?
I said I take it you rent.
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay, yeah. You don't own any real estate.
No, not at all. So it's creating a way of thinking that's completely different to what we've been taught to be the norm. Another aspect of that is your material wealth. For many people, for many wealthy people particularly, their wealth is tied up in a bank somewhere or stocks or whatever. The point being that it's not easily accessible. Now, we mentioned earlier that the way the man in the street would be affected most during World War III is more than likely economically, not militarily. So if your bank accounts are frozen and you have no expendable cash or way to purchase things, what are you going to do? Again, you've lost your freedoms. So gold is a very common and acceptable method of transferring wealth around. I've personally carried gold through metal detectors in airports, and it goes through undetected. So as long as you're not carrying, more than 4 or 5 pounds of gold on you, and don't ever declare it because it'll be confiscated from you.
Yeah,
that seems like
probably
good advice.
Yeah, gold never loses its value.
Yeah, don't declare the gold.
Yeah.
How do you trade gold out though? I mean, how does the average guy know? This is so many pounds of gold. It's worth X amount of dollars in this country. I mean, how do you do that?
Purchasing and selling gold is very easy. If you look up in the yellow pages under gold and bullion dealers, you'll find a place in your city. Walk into them. At the moment, and it may very well change, but at the moment there are no restrictions to the amount of gold you can buy or sell. There's no reporting. So currently it's fairly easy to trade in gold. There is also a website, e-gold.com, that allows you to maintain a balance that is backed by physical gold, and you can use that currency to purchase things online. So there are a number of different ways of doing it, but in terms of purchasing gold coins and selling them, it's a relatively easy process, very simple to do.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty interesting.
I do have a page or a section on the website, which is threeworldwars.com/prepare, which covers a fair amount of detail about various things that you can do in terms of what to do to avoid major cities, how to purchase gold. There's a huge amount of detail there. If you're serious about preparing, that's a pretty good starting point.
Okay, that's great. Now, tell us about your book that you've written in another name, under a pseudonym.
Yeah, I touched on very briefly cultural agility. And to me, the best preparation, instead of deciding where the safest place is on earth to go and live, rather prepare your mind. As long as you're mentally prepared, as long as you've broken free from the shackles of our current mindset that most of us are forced into from birth, and it's reinforced by our education systems, our religious systems, our political systems, the mindset needs to be broken free from. So I was involved in the writing of a book called Fresh Wisdom, which is subtitled Breakthrough to Enlightenment. And what I've done there is taken what I believe to be the 5 major areas of life, which is relationships, spirituality, independent wealth creation. Just to touch on what I mean by independent wealth creation, it's to leverage your time and generate an income that isn't linked to you being involved with it. So an example would be a pop star, Britney Spears. Let's use her as an example.
Right.
For many years, she put a lot of effort into producing high-impact videos and singing good songs, but she's now quit that and got fat and got married, and she doesn't have to work anymore.
She's getting divorced now.
Married to a loser.
K-Fed is K-Fed. K-Fed is done.
But,
he's getting out.
Okay.
Not like that, really.
Not that that matters. Well, I'm going to give you the last word here. What do you have for us? If you want to wrap things up in the next 6 minutes, where do you want to go here?
I'd really like to direct you to the website freshwisdom.com, which explains what the book is about. You can purchase it either on the website there or through Amazon with overnight delivery or 2 days delivery. That to me is, in essence, an encapsulation of the mindset that I believe is necessary to survive whatever we see coming, whether it be World War III, whether it be the Antichrist arriving, whether it be nuclear holocaust. If you're able to adapt the way you think and break free from the way most people think right now, remember that we've been, for most of us, even those that are somewhat more enlightened, your listenership, in other words, people who aren't focused on CNN every night, who at least research alternative news sources, even though we're slightly open to new ideas, we're still very much in the mold of expecting the government to look after us, expecting the government to come in when there's a disaster of some sort. The mindset that we need to create is one of complete independence. I am my own person responsible for my own safety and security. I cannot rely on anybody else. And that takes a fairly big change in the way we view the world and what happens around us. And that's, in essence, what we try and cover in Fresh Wisdom. So have a read about the details on that site, and obviously I'd be delighted if you support us by purchasing a book from there.
That's freshwisdom.com?
Freshwisdom.com, that's correct.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Oh, we've got a few more minutes. What do you think is... now, they can sign up for your email newsletter at your site, threeworldwars.com as well, correct?
That's correct. I send out a very random email. It's about once every 2 weeks, just whenever I feel like it. I guess the important thing for me, we've been talking about conspiracies and the world's turning into a really, really bad place. What I try and do is put on a bit more of a positive spin. Sure, things are going to become bad, but to me that's exciting. We are lucky to be living in the times that we are right now. And we are called to be creators, co-creators with God. Now, what does that creation mean? We can talk about either creating our own reality, or it can be creating a work, a piece that others can use. So in other words, we don't just go to our deathbeds without having given something back to society. And that's a challenge for us. For many conspiracy theorists, and certainly some of the sites that I have a look at and very quickly shut down because I can't stand the talk about shape-shifting reptilians, etc. But for many of them, it's a very negative view of the world.
That's true.
You know, everything is bad and against us, and the government is to be hated. And to me, that's such a negative way. It doesn't achieve anything. For one, it's far better to have a positive outlook and focus on what we can be co-creating. Enough said on that.
Well, no, that's true. I mean, a lot of the apocalyptic type of people are fairly negative, without much of alternatives to sort of deal with it. And I agree with you that if it is an inevitability, then you have to prepare for it. and you have to make changes in your life.
Now, do you have any plans for any new books anytime in the future?
I have started a new site which hasn't launched quite yet. What I wanted to do was break away from the current events focus and look more at a holistic life. Much of it has been triggered by some of the things that we've written about in Fresh Wisdom. I'm using the moniker of a life coach, but it's more going to be focused on how to address each of the 5 areas of life with tips and free advice. So once that site is ready for launching, I'll certainly be announcing it to all of my subscribers. I guess what I want to do is move away from the very negative approach of current events and focus more on how do we live a fulfilled life, no matter what happens around us.
That's good.
All right. Well,
that's pretty good advice.
Yeah, definitely sounds like you're prepared.
Well, I'm enjoying myself, and that's more than a lot of what I can say about other conspiracy guys.
Now, how long are you planning on staying in South Africa?
I will more than likely by early next year be back in Southeast Asia, but no fixed plans at this stage. So I'll only be here for another few months. When it starts getting cold again, I'll move somewhere else where it's warmer. That's another fantastic approach to take to life. Follow the sun. So you have a permanent sun.
That's true, man. You can't go wrong that way. At least it's always nice outside.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, we appreciate you coming on the show tonight. Thank you so much for staying up with us. I know it's really late, or actually really early in the morning there for you. What time is it now?
It's about coming up now, but it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. Take care.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that was Michael Haupt. All right, guys. Wow, that was something, didn't you think?
I know, totally. I mean, it was, and yes, I think buying gold is a good investment, no matter who you are. I got the.
You know, they've been preaching this buy gold thing for years now. Buy gold, buy gold, buy gold. We got 10 minutes, so if you want to, we got 10 minutes. You don't have to crank up the music yet. This is still a talk show.
All right, well, let's talk. Okay.
We're going to talk. We're going to talk, first of all, about who's coming up.
Yeah, let's do that.
Who's coming up next week. You know who's coming back, right? Thomas Horn.
He sure
Now,
is.
I have to say this, that he's probably one of the most interesting guests we had on in quite some time. Not to discredit any of the other guests and say they're not bad.
All of our guests are
Michael was awesome, too. But I'm just saying, if you liked what you heard tonight, you definitely tune back in next week, because Thomas is he's got some crazy stuff that's just it just blows your mind to hear some of the stuff that he's found. As far as the UFO stuff goes, so I mean it's pretty wild.
Oh, I know. Who's after? Oh, hold on. Why do I just look at it myself and not be? Sorry, I was in the chat room a lot. Let's look at the guest.
Look at the guest. Who do we got?
Okay, come on.
Now, I'm booked up all through.
We're
booked up all through March. Well, we're booking into March now.
Very cool. All right.
Yeah, Thomas Horn.
After Thomas Horn, we have Brent Miller, the Horizon Project.
That's a new take on the Planet X thing.
It is.
Yeah.
I saw the DVD the other day, and there's a.
You finished watching that?
There's a good deal of. You're right about the guerrilla filmmaking.
Oh no, I want to mention.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. I want to mention the Dark 30 tour that Joshua P. Warren's doing with Nick Redfern and Jim Mars.
That's coming up.
That's coming to Kansas City, so you guys check that out. And also, we're in a film, we're in a movie that's going to be debuting in Asheville, North Carolina.
Well, mainly Scott, because.
Come on now, leave me alone. Yeah. Anyway, it's going to be debuting in Asheville, North Carolina, December 14th. You can email us here, worldoftheunexplained@gmail.com, if you want more info. I'll give it to you as the time draws near. But we're going to be there partying like it's 1999, baby. That's right. Me, Chuck, and Trent. You can come down and meet the crew in Asheville, North Carolina. We're gonna be tearing it up.
We're going to be taking it out and chopping it up.
Taking it out and chopping it up. That's right.
I don't know where that came from. It's such a weird thing to say, but I like it.
But anyway.
Dark 30, Kansas City.
Dark 30, Kansas City.
Documentary.
Yeah, if you guys have any...
14th of December.
Yeah, and if you guys have any suggestions for upcoming future guests that you might want to hear on the show, please shoot us an email, worldoftheunexplained@g, as in Google, gmail.com. So worldoftheunexplained@gmail.com.
We've got a couple of guys from emails.
Yeah, we have. We've got a lot of our guests. Yeah, we do answer every single email we get too. We keep Chuck in the sweat house, man. No.
Get back to work, Chuck.
Go back and count that stack of money. We got to trade that in for gold later tonight.
That's right. Right now.
We're going to have a stack of gold back here instead of money, man. We're getting rid of the cash, dude.
From
That's
one-eyed Petey back there in the alleyway down there in Curtisville. You know, we drive by the place. You know, he has that little shanty.
Who's in the Yellow Pages?
That's no, he's not in the Yellow Pages.
The Yellow Pages.
I learned about him from T-Bone.
T-Bone.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna take the advice of a guy named T-Bone to do our gold. Did he have a gold tooth?
No, yeah, he did. And he had a mohawk. had a mohawk too.
You better be bringing again, man.
Uh-oh, yeah, you better. That's like a bad drug deal gone wrong.
Look, man, I know the people. I can
Do
trust
you?
them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Now the listening audience thinks
just dropped.
We're
going to get an email now. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, Trent's the shadiest guy, and
well, you know.
Anyway,
I'm writing my book still.
How's that going?
It's going good.
Yeah, is it that crazy thing?
It's not crazy, man. It's really cool. I think people are going to like it. I'm going to be the guest on shows from now on.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to be on, and people are going to come to our website and buy the new book. And well, anyway, I want to tell you guys about
what's the title of it?
It's called The Great Deception.
No, so it's not basically we're all going to die.
No, it's not basically we're all going to die. That could be your book, though. You could put that up on the site. Basically, we're all going to die by Trent Lackey.
That title's not.
You know what pisses me off? When you Google Trent Lackey, it pops up and it shows all these the unexplained links. When you Google Jay Scott, like everybody and their brother and mother, even Chuck's dad's on the page. Yeah. And then like 45 pages later, I don't even know. I haven't had the patience
Scott,
to go through it all.
You need
a unique name.
Yourself.
Yeah,
you need to call yourself Niccolo Di Seronio.
Yeah, then it'll pop up. You know, but yeah, you're like Google man.
Well, I mean, there aren't too many people named.
And the listeners just keep dropping like flies.
Yeah. Well, anyway. Well, the guest is gone. I mean, okay.
Dog was gone.
Yeah. Well, I want to mention this one thing though for you guys that are still hanging out. That on December 1st and 2nd, we're going to be doing a live show, and that live show is going to be while we're in the Twin Lakes Lodge, and the website for that is www.thetwinlakeslodge.com. Not just twinlakeslodge.com, but it's thetwinlakeslodge.com. If you go there, you can see the place. It's a pretty posh little resort bed and breakfast type deal.
But it's haunted.
Yes, it's haunted. And John Zaffis, we all know John. John Zaffis is coming down to do an investigation with Trent, myself, Chuck, a couple of the Ghostly Talk guys, and also Dr. Al Prophet. So we're all going to be in there.
Oh man, that's going to be an all-star cast.
Man. It is an all-star cast because Chuck's
for us.
there.
I mean, you know, it's not really us who are the star. It's Chuck, obviously.
Chuck is the star of the show.
That's right.
And yeah, we're all gonna be there. Obviously, that's not an open party.
He's like the Keith Richards of our little group, you know.
But we hope you guys will listen to us. We're gonna see what we can find. We're gonna scare some stuff out, or either that or
okay.
You won't hear me on the air.
I see what's going on. Trent, I think I heard something. Yeah, and then
I got to run, dude. Boom. Where did Scott go?
Scott's left the building.
I have left the building. I'm going to run, dude.
Scott scares pretty easily.
I'm a wuss, man. I'm not lying, dude. I am a total wuss.
No, I understand too. I mean, you know, it's creepy, man.
It is. Yeah, I don't want to
see like a real ghost. I mean,
yeah, dude.
I mean, we've had our experiences, guys. I mean, you know, if you
we all
to some
have
of the earlier shows. I mean, Scott and I wouldn't say ghost hunts.
That mixed bag thing. That's where we're doing the Chewbacca impersonations too. They're really good.
Yeah. Well, there's no need to bring those up now.
But they are good. Trent, you do the best Chewbacca impersonation of anyone I know.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty
Go ahead, do it real quick.
No, I'm not going to do it. Forget it. And you're not going to. I'm not some kind of jukebox. I'm not some kind of dancing.
That's all they want you for after it, man.
Well, let me tell you who we got coming up in 2007.
Let's do that.
2007, we've got a guy named Rich Andrews. He's going to be on the first. Yeah, we're actually broadcasting on New Year's Day here. Why? Because we're communists. No, I'm kidding. We're broadcasting on New Year's Day because, well, we figure everybody will be over their hangover then and they can listen to us. So we're broadcasting on New Year's Day, and that's Rich Andrews. He's going to talk about UFOs. And then after that, we've got, I think Jason Hawes from TAPS is going to come sometime in January.
Oh, cool.
Also in January, we've got Chris Roller. He's the guy that sued David Copperfield, saying that he stole his God powers. That's going to be interesting. Then we've got... Who else do we have in January?
Dr. Michael Bowden.
Cyril Wecht?
Cyril Wecht. That's
Yeah, you're the wrong doctor.
What are you
Yeah,
talking
we've got
about,
Dr.
Chuck?
Cyril Wecht. He's coming in February, actually. He's going to discuss the JFK assassination. He was actually on the House Senate Assassinations Committee. I haven't updated
the biggest, the most predominant expert.
Yeah, he's probably one of the most preeminent experts. He's done the Elvis Presley.
Predominant?
Yeah, he's done Elvis Presley, Autopsy, Jean-Benet Ramsey, all the big Hollywoodified cases out there he's done work on. And he's got a law degree and a medical degree. So he also teaches law school and med school. I mean, talk about... And he's also like the full-time pathologist for the city of Pittsburgh. Yeah.
That guy is like...
he's
a Fox News contributor to boot.
Is he a Fox News contributor as well? He stays busy, and he writes books all the time. So I don't even know how the man has any time to do anything.
Wow. Is 2 hours going to be enough with him?
Huh?
Is 2 hours going to be enough with him?
No, but it's going to be what we get.
Okay.
So,
well, I mean, I guess so.
I'm trying to think. Oh, Pastor Harry's coming.
Oh, Pastor Harry.
Pastor Harry from the SatansRapture.com.
He called one time.
Yeah, he did. He was on our Prophet Yahweh show,
right.
and he's going to come and give us his side of the story. And I can't remember who else. Oh, ex-vampire Bill Schneblin's coming back.
He is returning
in February. Yes, he is, and that'll be a great show. If you hadn't heard the first one, go check that out. That's basically all I've got for future. Well, I've got more, but I don't have the list in front of me. So if I've failed to mention a name, I apologize. But things are still getting worked out, and I will get the website up and running again on the guest thing. We got 1 minute left, so
man,
I guess this is it. Cue the music, man.
Should have been doing that.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
Come on.
This is original Chuck music.
Wow. It's called Ready to Rock.
All righty. Anyway, yeah, we're crazy here. So, yeah.
That's the dumbest name for a song ever.
I'm sure there are a couple of them out there.
Yeah, but it still doesn't change that fact.
All right, guys.
All right, Scott,
I'm Jay Scott. You're only JD DJ on the Omni Sound. Shoot, wow, that was bad. God, you get so used to saying one thing and then you screw. Yeah.
Okay, take two.
Take two. I'm Jay Scott. You're only JD DJ on the Planet Paranormal Radio Network.
And I'm Trent Lackey. We're coming to you from Kernersville, North Carolina, a small town where we talk about big things.
Chuck, we want you to say we out.
We out.